In this JavaScript tutorial, you are going to see about the functions in the JavaScript. So let's start understanding about the functions in the JavaScript, and we will see the syntax and examples. So let's see what is function first. So JavaScript function is a block of code and that is designed to perform a particular task. And functions will be invoked whenever it is called explicitly. In a nutshell, we will be writing a code block and that will be getting executed whenever we call the particular function by specifying the function name. Let us check the syntax now. So it will start with the function keyword and the function name and open and close brackets. And after that, we will be opening the curly brace. Then we are writing the code block here and then we are closing the curly brace. So this is the basic function syntax and we have the syntax too. So where we are passing the arguments to the function. If you look at the arguments here, argument 1, 2, 3 and so on. And whenever you get these arguments, you can manipulate those data or you can, based on the need or based on the demand, you can manipulate all the arguments data or you can perform some operations using these arguments. So that code block will be coming over here. So it's very much similar to the basic function. So this is how we can pass the parameters or the arguments to the functions in the JavaScript. So let's see the examples. What are the examples we are discussing in this functions with the JavaScript? The very first example is we are going to implement the basic function, and then in the second example we are going to implement a function with the arguments, and in the third example we are going to create a function and where arguments are optional. You can call a function by passing the argument or you can call a function without passing the arguments also. That can be done in the JavaScript. And the last example, we are going to implement a function with variable length arguments. For example, let's take an example of addition of numbers. If I pass two numbers, it will perform the addition of two numbers. And if I pass five numbers, it will perform addition of five numbers. If I pass seven numbers, that will perform the addition of seven numbers. So if you look at the total number of arguments, that's a variable length. How you can implement a function that accepts variable length of arguments? Then that particular example we are going to see at the end. So let's navigate to the VS Code. Let's start implementing the very basic function example. So simply I will create the one JS file here as functions. Here I'll say file.1 and then I'll say .js. So that's it. So let me maximize this window. Now you can implement functions by writing a function keyword followed by that. Here you can provide the function name. So here I'll say speak something as the function name. And here I'll add the brackets and I will open the curly brace and I will close the curly brace. So here I will write console.log statements. One is that simply I will add the message as good morning. And then I will write another console.log and here I'll say good afternoon. And then I will write another last JavaScript statement that is console.log. And here I'll say message as good night. So that's it. So this is a very basic function we have implemented in the JavaScript, and you can call this particular function by using the function name. So let's use the function name and simply I will copy this and I'll paste it here. Now let's run this particular JavaScript program, and if I run this particular JavaScript program, and it is going to print us the good morning, good afternoon and good night. So let's validate the output here. I will open the console. And if you see the output here, our function is invoking correctly, right? It is firstly printing good morning and then good afternoon, then good night, right? So simply I will add the console.log over here, and then simply I will add the just some statement here to separate the output basically. And if you see here, say for example, I want to invoke this particular code block 3 times. So I need to write all these 3 lines again and again, right? So that can be done by creating a simple function, and simply you can, after creating a function, directly you can call this particular function. So if you are implementing a functions in the JavaScript, basically you are not writing the duplicate code. So you need to avoid always writing the duplicate code in the JavaScript. So that can be done by implementing the functions. So for example, I want to call it once again. I don't need to write this whole code once again, right? Simply I will call this particular method. So let's call this particular method another 2 times. So now this particular output will be printing 3 times. And if you see here, so this is the first time whenever we are calling here, and whenever I'm calling second time, it is printing this particular output. And whenever I'm calling third time, it is printing the third set of output, right? No need to write this particular 3 lines every time if I want to invoke these 3 lines in my JavaScript code, right? So this is how you can implement the basic functions in the JavaScript. So let's try to implement the functions with the arguments. So what we will do is we'll add 2 numbers by taking the arguments from the whenever we are calling the method. So here I'll say function, and followed by that here I'll say add 2 numbers. And here, as I said in the syntax, right, here we have to pass the parameters or the arguments name, right? So here I'll say number 1, then here I'll say number 2. I want to perform addition of 2 numbers, so that's the reason I'm accepting only 2 numbers. Whenever anyone is calling this particular add 2 numbers, they have to pass 2 arguments. That's the 2 numbers. Now let's open and close the curly braces. And here I'll write simply return statement. So whenever I'm calling this particular method, this should return the result of addition of 2 numbers, right? So that's the reason I'm writing the return statement. So this will return you the addition of 2 numbers result. For example, number 1 value is 10 and number 2 value is 20. 10 plus 20, it is a 30. This particular function will return you the 30 as the output. So let's add the numbers now. So simply I will take the number 1 here I'll place it inside the brackets, and I will use the addition operator, and followed by that I will pass the number 2. Simply we are adding the 2 numbers by using the addition operators. That's it. So we have implemented a function with the arguments. Now we have to call this particular method, and also whenever we are calling this particular method, we have to pass the number 1 and number 2. So let's call this particular method add 2 numbers, and here we have to say so here I'm passing the number 1 as 10 and number 2 as 30. So this particular method returns the result, right? So simply I will save into the variable called result1, and then let's print the result1 by using the console.log. So here I'll say console.log, then I will add the message over here first, and then we will add this particular variable, the addition of 2 numbers is, so that's it. Now I will pass the result that is coming from the add 2 numbers method. So that's it. Now let's run the program. So the output should be 30. And if you see the output over here, the addition of, sorry guys, let me just update the message. So let me run it once again. And if you see the output here, the addition of 2 numbers is 30, right? So let's try to call it once again. So here I will just copy the same statements. I'll pass it here. You can call a number of times wherever it's required. Here I'll pass this time 50 plus 50. The output should be 100. And then here I'll update the variable name to the result2, and I'll pass this result2 over here. So that's it. Let's run the program once again. And if you see the output over here, so firstly it is computing the first addition of two numbers and that result is 30. And the second time the addition of two number value is 100. So that's the expected output. So this is how you can implement the basic functions and functions with the arguments in the JavaScript. Now I will start discussing about the functions with the optional arguments. For example, whenever we are calling method, right, like this, we can pass the arguments or we cannot even pass the arguments also. That particular function will invoke. But in this case, right, so we have to pass two arguments. So that is mandatory. So where some functions will be even optional also. They will accept an argument, otherwise it will work with the optional data, whatever the existing data they have with the parameters. Now let's start implementing the functions with the optional arguments. So here I'll say, just I'll add the comment as functions with optional arguments. So let's write the function keyword followed by that. So here I'll say print message as the function name. And here, as I said, so we have to add the argument name, that's a parameter name. And also we have to assign the value to that particular argument so that whenever user is not passing any value as a parameter, then it will invoke with the default value. So let's say here what equal to, here I'll say JavaScript tutorial. So let me just remove this A and add the S, and that's it. Now I will add one more thing here, one more parameter. Basically you can, if you want to play around the one parameter, simply you can add one parameter also. So in my case I'm adding another parameter as how many, and here I'll say as 5. So what I'm doing is, so here I have created a one argument name as what. So here I'm assigning the default value as JavaScript tutorial, and I'm creating another optional argument, that's how many, and I'm assigning the default value as 5. So here I'm just writing one for loop, and that is running 0 to the how many times. So it runs basically 5 times this particular for loop. So here I'll say index is less than the how many variable, so that contains the 5 as the value, and that's it. So what I will do is simply I will print the this particular what message. Let's say if this particular how many value is 2 times, if it is a 2, it will runs this particular for loop 2 times. Right now it is 5, so this particular loop will run 5 times, and whatever I have written inside this particular statement, that will be getting executed. So here I'm saying control.log, and simply I want to print the message, that's a what, whatever the value we have added inside the what variable, that is going to print it. That's it. We have created a function with optional arguments, and if you see here, whenever user called this particular print message method, they can pass the argument explicitly. So they have to pass the two arguments. One is what, the message, and second argument is how many times they have to pass it. Otherwise, if they are not passing any arguments, simply they are calling this particular method. So whatever the default value we have added here, so these things will be getting invoked. Now let's see how we can call this particular method. So first time we are calling this particular method without passing the argument. So basically what it does is this particular function, it runs 5 times. 5 times this particular message will be printing, that is a JavaScript tutorial will be printed 5 times, because default value is this particular message, that is a JavaScript tutorial, and 5 times. So it will print the 5 times JavaScript tutorial in the console output. Let's get this particular statement, and I will add it after calling the method. Then we will run the JavaScript program, and now we will validate the output. So let's see the output, and if you see the output over here, JavaScript is printed, JavaScript tutorial is printed 5 times, and if you see here that count, because it is showing the count, basically it is printed the same message 5 times, right? Now this time what we will do is, so it is taking the default values, whatever we have written there with the function, that is taking the default values this time, because we never passed the arguments over here. Now this time what we will do is we will pass the arguments. So what we are passing is here. So here I'll say first message as, that's a what, for what we are passing the one message as tester stock. Then I want to print, so how many, we have to pass the how many. The default value is 5. So now we are passing the argument here. So here I'll say I want to print 2 times. And if I execute this program, tester stock will be printed 2 times, right? Because now this time we are passing parameters or arguments explicitly. Let's run the program and we will validate the output. And if you see the output over here, so this particular message is printing with the default values. And whenever we are calling second time, so we are passing the custom message and also custom count. So we are printing only 2 times tester stock. So this is how we can implement the functions with the optional parameters or the optional arguments. Now let's see how you can implement a function that accepts variable length arguments. For example, so if you see the example of add 2 numbers, so in this case we have to pass only 2 numbers. For example, if I want to add 3 numbers, so again I will have to come here and I will have to pass the number 3 here like this, and again I will have to add the plus, that's addition operator, and number 3 if I want to add 3 numbers. And if I want to add 4 numbers, again I will have to pass the variable as the number 4, and again I will have to add the number 4 to this particular list. Then I will get the addition of 4 numbers. So how you can avoid implementing a function like this? So basically we are going to implement a function that accepts variable length of arguments. So let's see how we can implement that. So here I'll say function, followed by that here I'll say add numbers. So here I'm not giving any specific add 2 numbers or something. So here I'm saying directly add numbers. So that's it. Now here I'm going to create a one variable called var, and here I'll say total. So I will assign total value to this particular variable whenever I'm adding the any given numbers. And then I'm writing a one for loop here. So that will iterate. If I get 10 values to this particular add numbers, that will iterate by using the for loop. So here I'll say length I will have to specify. So here I'll say arguments dot length. So this particular arguments length will get the total number of elements or total number of numbers are coming to this particular method. So that's it. So that this is a very simple for loop what we have written. So it is running from the 0 to the length of the arguments based on the user passing number of arguments. Now what we have to do is we have to get sorry guys, we have to get one by one numbers and we have to add to this particular total variable. So what I will do is simply I'll say total plus, and I will get this particular arguments of, and I'll say index. That's it. Then I will assign back to the total. So we have done it in the very easy manner, guys. So what you need to understand here is we have the one arguments. So by using this, we are finding out how many numbers are there, and we are getting every number from that particular array by using the index, and we are adding this particular number to the our total. So this particular total variable contains the addition of the all the numbers. If I pass 5 numbers, that contains the addition of 5 numbers. If I pass 10 numbers, that contains the addition of 10 numbers. So at the end, I'm saying return statement. Then I will return the total variable value. So that's it. Now we have to call this particular method and we have to pass the variable length arguments. Let's pass the two numbers in the first time. Simply I will call this particular method, and then so it will say 10 plus 20, and that will returns you the one result. So here again I'll say var test result 1. So that's the variable name I'm giving here, and then we'll print this particular variable value by using the console.log. So here I'll say addition of two numbers is, then I will pass the test result 1 variable value over here. That's it. Now let's run the program. At the end, the output of this particular addition of two numbers, that's add two numbers method, should return as the addition of these two numbers, that's 30 as the output. So let's run this particular program, and we'll start passing the variable length arguments also. So it is returning us some exception. So let's look at the exception. So it is saying that it is not a function, add numbers, and let me just check it. What is the issue over here? Just give me a few seconds. Okay, so here I'll say brackets instead of that. Let me remove the, and if you see the output over here now, just I have fixed it. So we are passing the index. So that's the reason we have not written a proper bracket. So that was the small issue. And if you look at the output over here, the addition of two numbers is 30. Now let's perform the addition of four numbers this time. So simply I will copy this and I'll paste it here. So here I'll say this one variable as test result 2, and here I'll pass another 10 and another 20, and this is the addition of four numbers, right? Now I will pass this particular variable over here, and here I will update the message as addition of four numbers. Let's run the program, and output will be, it is 60, right? So basically it is adding the four numbers this time. And like this, let's add the addition of five numbers also. So we have to pass the five arguments. So here I'll say test result 3, and I'll pass this variable over here, and I will pass the another argument here as another 10. That's it. So this time the output of this test result 3 would be 70. Just we are adding the 10, but we are passing the total number of arguments is 5. Let's run the program, and we will validate the output. And if you see the output here, so 70 is the expected output, right? So this is how you can implement the functions with variable length of arguments.